Imagine you're sitting in a room. Nothing unusual, same walls, same ceiling, same furniture you've seen 1,000 times. But for some reason, the room is breathing. The patterns on the carpet are slowly rotating. Your hand held in front of your face leaves a faint trail behind it like a comet. And what's the most unsettling part? You know intellectually that none of this is real. Your senses are lying to you, and yet the experience is completely, undeniably, viscerally there. Now, here's the question nobody asks. What if that experience isn't chaos? What if that's actually your brain doing something it was always capable of? Something that it does every single night without you noticing. Most people have a pretty simple model of how drugs work. Depressants slow you down, stimulants speed you up, hallucinogens scramble everything, shake the brain like a snow globe, wait for things to settle weird, and call it a day. But that model is almost completely wrong. And the actual answer, what LSD really does and why, is genuinely one of the stranger stories in modern neuroscience. To understand it, we need to start with a question most people never think to ask. What does the brain do normally? Here's the thing, your brain doesn't experience the world, it predicts it. Right now, you think you're seeing and hearing and feeling reality as it is, like your senses are a live feed. But they're not. There's a lag. Light hits your eyes, signals travel through neurons, and the actual processing takes longer than the speed of thought you feel. So your brain doesn't wait. It uses everything it knows, your past, your context, your expectations, to predict what's about to happen. And it serves you that prediction as if it were live reality. Your senses just correct the prediction when it's wrong. This is called predictive processing model, and it has a wild implication. Perception is basically a controlled hallucination. Your waking life is a very accurate guess, which raises the obvious follow up. What happens when something disrupts the prediction engine? LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, was first synthesized in 1938 by a Swiss chemist named Albert Hofmann, who was looking for a respiratory stimulant and mostly ended up with history's most famous accidental bike ride. 5 years later, after synthesis, he accidentally absorbed a tiny amount through his fingertips, went home feeling dizzy, closed his eyes, and experienced what he called an uninterrupted stream of fantastic pictures, extraordinary shapes with intense kaleidoscope play of colors. He wasn't sure what happened. So, because this was 1943 and the ethics boards were more of a future suggestion, he deliberately took what he calculated was a threshold dose. It was actually roughly 3 times a standard dose. Then he attempted to bike home. That was April 19th, 1943. It's now celebrated annually in certain circles as Bicycle Day. The point is, from the very beginning, LSD was strange, not just in effect, but in mechanicism. Nobody could figure out why such a tiny amount, we're talking micrograms, millionths of a gram, could produce effects that lasted 12 hours and completely restructured how a person experienced reality. For decades, the dominant assumption was that LSD was causing chaos, neurological noise, a kind of storm in the brain. Then they actually looked. In 2016, researchers at Imperial College London conducted the first study to image a human brain on LSD using modern scanning technology. They gave volunteers either LSD or a placebo, put them in an fMRI machine, and watched what happened. They expected disorganization, reduced activity, maybe something like deep sleep or anesthesia. What they found was almost the opposite. On LSD, the brain wasn't quieter, it was louder, more connected. Regions that don't normally talk to each other were suddenly firing in concert. The visual cortex, instead of receiving input only from the eyes, started receiving input from everything, memory centers and emotional centers, the parts of the brain that handle meaning and self narrative. The brain wasn't scrambled, it was running on a different wiring diagram. This explains something researchers had noticed but couldn't place. Why LSD experiences often feel meaningful. Why people don't just see random colors, they see patterns and geometrics that feel somehow significant. Why emotions and visuals get tangled together. Why a memory can suddenly appear as a physical sensation. It's not noise, it's crosstalk. The brain's normally separated processing stems are leaking into each other. But here's where things get even stranger. One of the most consistent effects of LSD, reported across thousands of users across decades, is something called ego dissolution. At higher doses, the sense of being a separate self starts to fade. The boundary between you and the world becomes permeable. People describe it as merging with their surroundings, with other people, with reality itself. Some describe it as terrifying. Some describe it as the most profound experience of their lives. Neuroscientists had a name for the brain network that, when disrupted, produces this exact experience. It's called default mode network. The default mode network is active when you're not focused on any particular task, when you're mind wandering, daydreaming, or ruminating. It's also crucially associated with self referential thought, the constant background narrative of I, the mental voice that says, "This is happening to me. I feel this way. I want that thing." On LSD, the default mode network goes quiet, not just a little quiet. In the Imperial study, it was among the most dramatically suppressed regions of the brain, and the degree of its suppression correlated directly with how strongly participants reported ego dissolution, which means the sense of you, the continuous, bounded, narrative self you experience every waking moment, is not fundamental. It's a process, it's something the brain generates, and it can be turned down. This is where neuroscience collides with something much older: Buddhist philosophy. For thousands of years, the self has been described as a kind of construction, an illusion generated by mental processes rather than a real, fixed thing. The goal of certain meditation practices is specifically to see through this construction, to reach a state described as no self, the direct experience of consciousness without the overlay of ego. Experienced meditators, people with decades of practice, show measurable changes in the default mode network. It's less active during rest, more flexible, and more easily quieted. What LSD appears to do chemically is produce a version of that state in hours rather than years. This is not a coincidence that researchers are ignoring. It's one of the central questions in a new wave of psychedelic science. Studies at Johns Hopkins, NYU, and Imperial College have now demonstrated that a single dose of psilocybin, the active compound in magic mushrooms, which acts on the same receptor as LSD, can produce lasting reductions in depression and anxiety in patients who didn't respond to anything else. The effect appears to be mediated not by sedation or suppression, but by something like a reset, a temporary loosening of the rigid patterns the brain has locked itself into. The one specific receptor both LSD and psilocybin bind to, a serotonin 2A receptor, a receptor that plays a certain role in flexible thinking, cognitive updating, and the brain's willingness to revise its own models of the world. LSD doesn't flood the brain with serotonin, it mimics a very specific signal, one that tells your brain, your current model might be wrong. Open up. So, what actually happens on LSD? The brain's prediction machinery gets temporarily overridden. The filters that usually constrain perception, the ones that say, "This is what a wall looks like, move on," relax. Sensory information comes in raw, uncompressed, overlapping with memory and emotion and meaning in ways that normally don't happen. The network responsible for generating your sense of self gets quiet, and in that quiet, perception expands to fill the space where you used to be. The visuals aren't random, they emerge from your own brain's architecture. Patterns generated by the visual cortex when its normal inputs are supplemented by everything else. The emotional intensity isn't manufactured. It's what happens when the brain's usual emotional compartmentalization breaks down. It is, in a very precise sense, a temporary restructuring of how you experience existing. Here's a thought I'll leave you with. You wake up every morning and seamlessly reconstruct your sense of self, your name, your history, your ongoing story of who you are and what you want. It feels automatic, inevitable, fundamentally you. But the brain builds that experience the way it builds everything else, through a process, a set of active, ongoing calculations that are, in principle, uninterruptible. What LSD reveals, what the neuroscience is increasingly confirming, is that the mind is not a fixed thing looking at the world through a window. It's more like a performance, impressively consistent, astonishingly convincing, but fundamentally a construction. And if the self is constructed, that raises a question that doesn't have any answer. Who's doing the constructing? Maybe the most interesting part of the LSD story isn't what the drug does to consciousness. It's what it reveals consciousness already is, even when nothing unusual is happening at all.